It's Caleb here from the Game Glyph, and in this video we're going to take a look at 7 games for the Sega Genesis that are beat-em-ups that aren't Streets of Rage. You know, the games that actually aren't the best beat-em-ups on the Sega Genesis. So here we go, without further ado, check it out. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Hyperstone Heist was developed and published by Konami and released in 1992 for the Sega Genesis in North America. I couldn't even make this list of games without mentioning this. If you look at the game, you can clearly see it's an absolutely wonderful looking game. Really sharp and colorful graphics. I love playing as Donatello, that's kind of my dude. And personally, I prefer this game over its Super Nintendo iteration, and I plan on making a video about that pretty soon, if you know what I mean. Konami did a really bang-up job bringing to life a lot of the same characteristics and aesthetics of the Saturday morning cartoon show, with also playing homage to the very, very famous and classic arcade game. Again, I prefer this version actually over the Super Nintendo version. There's something about the collision detection and the action in this game. It just really, really feels great. Also, I prefer the music to this version. It has a fantastic score. It definitely belongs in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ethos. I love playing through this, and I do it all the time. It's one of the classics. You can never get enough Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You know, it's really weird in this game how you can find pizza in the sewer. I don't know if I would eat that, but I guess if I was like a mutant turtle, I probably would. The game's story is exactly what you would expect it to be. Shredder is being a giant douche, and you must stop him. In the meantime, you fight a lot of different bosses, Bebop and Rocksteady, foot soldiers. The only thing that I don't like about this game in particular, and a lot of these beat-em-up games, is that there's always this, I wouldn't say it's a screen bomb, but it's like your alternate attack. And basically what you do is you press the attack and jump button at the same time, and one of the turtles will do a move that takes some of your health, and it's supposed to damage all the enemies that are around you. And it's a useful move, but man, I hate the fact that it takes your health. That's like really annoying. It kind of reminds me how in the first X-Men game, when you use your mutant powers, there's actually a power meter for it, like it's some kind of magic. I feel like any of the moves that the turtles do in this game would not require them submitting some of their health to do it. Either way, this is an absolutely classic game for Sega Genesis, and you have to play it if you haven't played it already. It is a stone cold classic and fun to play and will hold up probably forever. Ah, the good old days of Konami, before they sucked. Comix Zone for the Sega Genesis is an often overlooked gem in my opinion. This game was way ahead of its time, and really nothing since has ever been quite like it. This game was developed by the Sega Technical Institute and published by Sega and released in 1995. It's an action beat-em-up, but it's not like any other game that's ever came out before it or after. And by that I mean, in this game you play literally inside of a comic book, going from scene to scene. You play a sketch turner and get sucked into a comic book by the evil Mortis, who's trying to unleash the mutants upon the real world and escape the comic book world. It's a really cool storyline. Basically, you play as an artist that created a comic book that comes to life, and the villain in the comic book becomes sentient and tries to escape into the real world. So he sucks in Sketch, and you have to fight your way through all the different pages of the comic to eventually defeat him. This game has great music, really colorful graphics with really sharp details, and it's just a really, really neat game with good music. I will say this, it is very, very hard. That's probably why this game didn't do as well as it could have, because it's quite unforgiving. The controls are a little bit bizarre in the sense that when you get into a fight with an enemy, it almost seems like you're in like a fighting game at that point, with similar to, I don't know, almost Eternal Champion-like fighting. I can't really explain it. It's very different. This is definitely a game that's worth playing that's been overlooked quite often. And you can find it in Sega collections, even on the one that came out on the Switch recently. So it's not like people have forgotten about this game completely, but it definitely doesn't get the love that it deserves. And I would love to see Sega pick this back up and make a new version of this game. Maybe make it a little bit more forgiving so people can actually enjoy it a little bit more. But it is worth the challenge, and once you get used to it, you will find your way through this game. You can pick up a lot of different items that help you along your way, so there's almost like a graphic adventure aspect of the game as well. I love his little trusty rat that can help him get out of a lot of different situations. Comix Zone on Sega Genesis, I would say, really is a classic in its own right. It just doesn't get the notoriety it deserves. Cyborg Justice, developed by Nova Trade and published by Sega, released in 1993. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I'm gonna put it on record. I freaking love this game. I don't care what anybody says. I know the controls are hard, but this game is so fun, and once you get used to the controls, it is very rewarding. In this game, you play as an alien that crash lands on a planet and his brain is taken out and put into a cyborg, and they try to force him to become a slave, but he doesn't. He rebels. And that's right, you're a rebelling slave against the cyborg hordes on this planet. So your goal in this game is to defeat all the enemies and eventually set free all the other slave robots so you guys can take back over the planet and have some freedom. Spoiler alert, after you beat this game, you become the leader of the group and you stay on the planet to take care of things. I guess you live forever. You're kind of like the cyborg savior, if you will. Like I said, the controls take some getting used to. They're really bizarre. There's a lot of button combinations you have to use where you have to like hold down B and press up and down to do different moves, things like that. But once you get used to it, it's very rewarding. You can fight all your enemies in different ways in this game. You can even pull off their limbs and make them your own. You can even pull off their torsos and absorb their life essence to give you more health. The game is pretty linear and it's a bit weird as far as the way the progression goes. And there is an end boss, slightly anticlimactic, but it's still pretty fun. I highly suggest picking the pneumatic legs when you first start out, because the very first level, there's a giant jump that you have to get across. And even now to this day, I fall into the ravine a lot because you have to get used to the jumping mechanics. It's pretty bizarre. I highly recommend looking the controls up online so you can see what they actually are, because there's a lot of different things that you can do in this game. And it's very fun. Cyborg Justice, I would not call it a classic because not enough people like this game to really consider it a classic, but it is definitely a game Glyph classic. I love this game. I love the music. I love the storyline. I love the gameplay. It's two-player. It's a beat-em-up, but a different kind of beat-em-up. I mean, what other game can you play on the Sega Genesis where you can rip off the limbs of your opponents? That's freaking awesome. There are so many moves to learn in this game. It's actually really, really deep, but it is very hard. But once you get used to it, it's totally worth it. Play Cyborg Justice with an open mind. Give this game a try. The Punisher for Sega Genesis was developed by Capcom and Sculptured Software and published by Capcom, and it's actually a really good game. This game was released in 1994 for the Sega Genesis, and is pretty much a port of the arcade game under the same name. You play as either Frank or Nick Fury, and you're going to want to play as Frank Castle because he's Frank Castle. He's the Punisher. And your goal in this game is to stop the Kingpin from being an awful, terrible asshole. And that's what he does in this game. And as the Punisher would do, he goes around killing people. He's not Batman. He doesn't beat them up. I mean, he does that too. But he also murders people. That's what makes him the Punisher. These people are gonna get punished. This game is really fun. It's a little bit buggy, and I don't really hear a lot of people talk about this game. I don't see a lot of this game on the internet, but it's definitely worth playing. It's kind of expensive for the Sega Genesis, but it's totally a game that's worth playing. It's a beat 'em up. It's two-player. You can pick up items like guns and other weapons throughout the game and destroy your enemies in different ways and eviscerate them. It's a little bit violent, but again, this game is a lot of fun to play. It's rather short because it's an arcade game, of course, but this port actually is really good, and I highly recommend playing it. The music's good, the graphics are good, the controls are good, and it's really fun. It's an action-packed game. Have I emphasized how much fun this game is to play? It definitely captures the feeling of being the Punisher. In fact, this is probably the best Punisher game that's ever come out, in my opinion. Play the Punisher on Sega Genesis. It's really fun. It's even more fun when you play it with a buddy. The Death and Return of Superman, developed by Blizzard of all companies. That's right, Blizzard. The people that brought you games like Warcraft 2, World of Warcraft, and Diablo made The Death and Return of Superman. It was also developed partly by Sunsoft and then released and published by Sunsoft as well in 1995 for the Sega Genesis. This is actually a pretty competent beat 'em up, albeit it's very, very hard. What's neat about this game is it starts out following very closely the story of the comic book. Basically, you're Superman and you're fighting through enemies I've never even seen before through Metropolis, and eventually you get to Doomsday, who absolutely slaughters and kills you. Firstly, his cronies come down. They look very much like him. They're like weak little clones. But eventually you get to the actual Doomsday, and of course he quote-unquote kills Superman. And then the gameplay picks up where you play as the alternative Superman. You've got Cyborg Superman, you've got the Man of Steel, you've got Eradicator, you've got all kinds of little Supermen. Superboy, you know, all those guys. But back to the actual game itself. This is a really good game, and I think Blizzard did a good job on this. Again, it is really hard. It's a one-player game. If they could have somehow made it two-player, which I don't see how that's really possible, maybe add somebody else in from the Justice Justice League, like Shazam or Flash or Batman. I don't know. This is a pretty competent beat 'em up that I don't really hear a lot of people talk about. It has really good graphics and music, and it definitely follows the storyline pretty well to the comic book that was really, really popular and controversial at the time. This is a game that I think people should definitely give a shot to. And there's a Super Nintendo version of this as well, but I would have to say that the Sega version, just for whatever reason, plays a little bit better, and it did come out a year later than the Super Nintendo version. This is The Death and Return of Superman on Sega Genesis. It's actually a really good game. Spider-Man Maximum Carnage. This was a game I was really excited about as a kid. The marketing for this was all over the place, and at the time I was really into the Spider-Man hype. The cartoon, that animated series that came on Saturday morning, oh my god, the only thing better than that was the X-Men cartoon. This game for me is a little bit of a disappointment. For one reason, it's only one player. Another reason is it's actually kind of a buggy game. Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage was developed by Software Creation and Acclaim Black Team. This game was released in America in 1994 for the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and oh man, it just really didn't hold up for me. The saving graces, the caveat here, is that the music in this game is incredible. The music was written by the artist Green Jello, who's absolutely fantastic. And if you don't know who that is, I totally understand, but just understand something about this game. Even though it's an Acclaim Entertainment game, that is literally just LJN with a different name. That's right, this is an LJN game. Make no mistake, and it plays like one. Now, with that being said, it is one of the better LJN games, because for whatever reason, Marvel gave license to them to make a lot of their games, and usually only producing disappointing results. Now, when I was a kid and I played this game, I thought it was pretty cool. The marketing, again, was amazing. I remember the Paint the Town Red marketing was really awesome, seeing that in comic books. It was really cool, so they really hyped up this game. You start the game out as Spider-Man, and you're supposed to find and destroy Carnage, who's this terrible psychopath that has the symbiote suit, very similar to that of Venom. Eventually in this game, you get to play as Venom after you find and unlock him. And during the quest of this game, you actually follow the comic book pretty tightly. There's a lot of really cool comic book cutscenes that are very similar to that of the actual comic itself. But where this game really fails is that it's very repetitive. The controls are tight, and the graphics, they look fine. They didn't age very well, and it's definitely not better than its sequel, Separation Anxiety. The problem again with this game is how repetitive it is. The problem again with this game is how repetitive it actually is. And the problem with this game also is how repetitive it actually is. And also the worst thing about this game is how repetitive it is. And by repetitive, what I mean is you fight the exact same looking enemies over and over and over again, and they're just these dudes on the street. I really feel like you're fighting homeless people in this game, and that's really not cool at all. Like, why are you beating up on homeless people? But I will say this, the music is good, the controls are fine, you definitely kind of feel like Spider-Man, but there are some parts of this game, the parts that actually aren't repetitive, where you're not beating up the exact same looking dudes over and over again with different stupid names, where you're climbing the walls, that really sucks. And that's when the controls break down, when you're having to do web slinging. That actually really sucks in this game. Playing as Venom is kind of cool, but he really plays almost exactly like Spider-Man. There's nothing really completely different about him other than the way that he looks. So I would really not recommend this game to anybody, and albeit the music is good, the controls are okay, and the graphics are okay, the gameplay just sucks. Spider-Man and Venom, Maximum Carnage. Bleh. Kind of disappointing, kind of drab, definitely doesn't hold up. Golden Axe 2. I had to leave this video on a good note. Golden Axe 2 was developed and published by Sega and released in North America on the Sega Genesis in 1992 on January 26. This game is absolutely one of the greatest games of all time, and this is probably my favorite Golden Axe game, that's absolutely for sure. And this is probably also my favorite beat 'em up outside of the aforementioned Streets of Rage 2. Weirdly, I kind of go back and forth between which game I like more, but I really love Golden Axe 2. In this game, the storyline is quite simple. You pick one of the three characters, either the dwarf, the female sorceress, or the Conan the Barbarian-like warrior, and you battle your way through the hordes and hordes of demons and the undead, as well as some other weird people. On the way, you can ride dragons and pick up meat and hit wizards and get books out of them. You can build up your magic meter. Each level you build your magic meter yields a different spell, and I suggest actually going for the female sorceress warrior in this game, the battle mage, because if you build up hers all the way, you unlock a dragon that wipes out everything on the screen. This game has very simple controls. You You can jump, attack, and use your spell. That's pretty much it. You can press forward to run, and you can even do like a flying kick, as well as a couple other simple little acrobatic moves. This game is very satisfying, and it's one of the best two-player experiences on the system. I really can't speak highly enough of how perfect this game is. Now, you could say I'm being a little bit hypocritical because the last game I mentioned, I said that you fight the exact same enemies over and over again. In this game, you kind of do that, but it's a lot more fun because it's a lot more engaging. There's a lot more strategy. The controls are better. The graphics are better. The music is better. Everything about it is better. And there's different versions of each enemy, and each enemy, based on their coloration, gets progressively harder and more difficult, and the AI gets smarter. I've beat this game many times alone and with friends, and I couldn't recommend this game highly enough. This is absolutely a stone cold classic and the very best Golden Axe game ever made. Golden Axe 2 on Sega Genesis is a perfect way to end this list on something extraordinary that's a beat 'em up for the Sega Genesis that isn't Streets of Rage 2. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I really enjoyed making it. Let me know in the comments below what some of your favorite beat-em-up games are on the Sega Genesis, and which one's actually the best in your opinion. I'd love to know that in the comments below. Is there any other beat-em-ups that I missed? I know there's a few that I could have covered, and I probably will in a future video, but let me know what you guys think I should talk about. Again, thanks for watching my video, and if you're just now stumbling across my channel, please do me a favor, subscribe. It'd mean a lot to me. And until next time, kids, we'll see you again real soon. Bye!